In 1720, the most famous scientist in the world made the dumbest money decision of his life. Isaac Newton, the man who worked out how planets move, watched one company's stock wipe out years of careful saving in a few brutal months. He knew it was a bubble. He said it was a bubble. He sold his shares for a clean profit. Then the price kept climbing without him, and he couldn't stand it. So he went back in, right before everything snapped. By the end of the year, he had lost what would be worth millions today, in a scheme he already understood was dangerous. And there's one small, ugly detail about how he lost that almost never makes it into the history books. This is Isaac Newton and the South Sea Bubble, the genius who lost to greed.
I can calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people.
To see how a mind like that gets pulled under, you have to see the water he was swimming in. Early 1700s, Britain looked solid from a distance. The king was on the throne. The navy controlled key sea routes. London merchants were getting rich. But the government itself was buried in IOUs from years of war. It owed money to thousands of people and had no simple way to pay them back. So people did what they still do today when the numbers don't add up. They invented a story. In cramped coffee houses, thick with pipe smoke and gossip, men leaned over scratched tables and passed around a new idea. Take the government's dull, unpaid debts, wrap them inside a flashy company, let people trade pieces of that company like lottery tickets, and somehow everyone walks away richer. The South Sea Company was that promise in human form. On paper, it would take over chunks of government debt. In return, it got a special right to trade in the South Seas, which sounded like faraway ports, Spanish silver, exotic riches. Almost nobody in London had any real picture of that trade. They didn't need one. The pitch was brutally simple. Swap your boring IOUs for South Sea shares and watch those shares go up. The real product wasn't cargo. It was hope. Here's how it worked when you stepped up to the table. You handed in your safe but sleepy government debt. You got South Sea shares instead. On paper, as more people joined, the share price rose. The company promised fat dividends soon. You didn't have to understand the fine print. All you had to understand was the chart going up. Behind that smooth story, the wiring was messier. Politicians were offered cheap shares they could flip for fast profits, as long as they helped pass laws that made life easier for the South Sea Company. One law, the Bubble Act, is often described in textbooks as the government trying to calm down a crazy stock market. In reality, lawyers tied to South Sea helped shape it, so that rival companies would be strangled. If you wanted in on the action, the message was clear. This is the table. The numbers started to do the selling for them. In January 1720, a South Sea share cost about £120. By March, as rumours spread that even more government debt would be turned into shares, the price hit £300. Imagine you're in that coffee house. A neighbour who barely knows his way around a ledger tells you he's doubled or tripled his money in a few months. He winks. He says you're too clever to miss this. The city filled with wild talk about huge fleets, rivers of silver, endless dividends. Old stories about slow, patient savings suddenly sounded stupid. It felt less like investment and more like a machine that turned social status into profit. If you weren't in, you weren't just missing money. You were missing the future.
The nation then too late will find, computing all their cost and trouble, directors' promises but wind, South Sea, at best, a mighty bubble.
Isaac Newton was not watching this from the cheap seats. As master of the Royal Mint, he saw the government's books up close. Early in the year, he bought a sensible amount of South Sea stock, rode the price up, then sold around £300 a share. He made a tidy sum. He told friends the whole thing looked insane and would end badly. He was right. And that's where his real problem began. Watching other people get richer than you. After Newton sold, the price didn't fall. It kept climbing. By June, it was close to £1,000 a share. People he did not see as his equals were suddenly bragging about gains that buried his. A junior clerk who had copied Newton's first trade, but refused to sell now, looked, on paper, richer than the great Isaac Newton. At dinners and meetings, that fact didn't need to be spoken. It just sat there between the wine glasses. History sometimes skips this part because it makes Newton feel a little too human. He didn't just shake his head and walk away. He did what many of us do when we feel left behind. He stopped thinking like a scientist and started thinking like a jealous neighbor. In the summer of 1720, Newton jumped back in. He put his earlier profits back into South Sea stock and added more. To do it, he sold some of his steady government bonds, the slow, boring stuff he knew was real. Some accounts say he even bought shares for relatives, tying their fortunes to the same story. That's the part of the tale most people quietly leave out. The smartest man in Europe didn't just risk himself, he dragged his circle in with him. For a short while, nothing terrible happened. The price slipped a bit, then hovered. You can imagine the stories people told themselves. It's just a correction. This is healthy. We're in for the long term. Those are the same lines people repeat today when they need to stay in a dream. But underneath, trust was seeping away. Insiders who had been given cheap shares started to sell in private. A new batch of shares the company tried to offer at a high price didn't find enough buyers. Quietly, numbers began to clash with the story. The company's real trade profits looked tiny next to the wild promises in the market. The magic started to flicker. By late summer and early autumn, the mood in London snapped. The same coffeehouses that had echoed with tips and boasts now buzzed with panic. South Sea stock began to fall, slowly at first, then like someone had cut a rope. From near 1,000 down through 700, 400, then below the levels where early investors like Newton had first bought in. Imagine opening a letter and seeing that a year's savings had become the price of a few good coats. Clerks stared at piles of paperwork that were suddenly just paper. Some investors slipped down side streets and never returned. Servants whispered about masters who had vanished. One detail is easy to miss if you like neat morals. Many powerful men got out early. Ministers and insiders sold large blocks of shares just before the steepest drops, guided by quiet warnings about bad news and coming inquiries. Ordinary people never got those whispers. They were still being told to hold for the rebound.
This unhappy affair began at a time when the greedy desires of mankind were grown up to a madness and a disease.
For Newton, the damage was brutal. He lost around £20,000, several million in today's money, enough to fund years of research or to secure his entire extended family. Afterward, he reportedly refused to hear the words South Sea at all. The polished version of his famous quote makes it sound like he calmly learned a wise lesson about human madness. The truth is uglier. He saw the danger early. He acted wisely. Then he couldn't live with being the man who sold too soon. There's a soft version of this story where the message is, even geniuses mess up, so relax. That's comforting. It's also not why Newton was destroyed. He wasn't too dumb to see the bubble. He was too human to stand feeling left out. He stopped asking, "Does this make sense to me?" and started asking, "How can I watch them get rich without me?" That single shift cost him more than any equation ever gave him. Today we call that feeling FOMO, fear of missing out. Psychologists who study it find the same pattern over and over. When we feel out of control, less capable than others, or cut off from the group, our brains light up at stories of easy wins. Other people's gains don't just look attractive, they feel like proof that we're failing. On brain scans, that social pain shows up in some of the same regions as physical pain. Your body treats being left behind as a threat. But FOMO is a signal, not a command. In experiments, people who simply paused long enough to name what they were feeling, "This is FOMO, this is me reacting to what I see, not what I know," were less likely to chase after choices that didn't fit their real goals. A tiny gap between the feeling and the action was enough to change behavior. So here is the one rule Isaac Newton never used, and the only one you actually need from this story. The next time you are tempted to throw money at something just because everyone around you seems to be winning, stop and ask out loud, "If nobody else were doing this, would I still want it?" If the honest answer is no, walk away. That's it. That's the line he crossed, and you don't have to. Centuries after the South Sea bubble, The tokens have changed. Crypto spikes, meme stocks, housing frenzies, AI coins. But the pressure is the same. You will almost certainly face a moment where the chart, the crowd, and your own fear of being left behind all pull in one direction. The question isn't whether you're smarter than Isaac Newton. The market didn't beat Isaac Newton. His own fear of being left behind did. The charts will always find new ways to tempt you. The only real edge you have is the part of you that can watch the crowd run and still walk away. The next bubble won't look like South Sea stock, but the pressure will feel exactly the same. When that moment comes, remember this story, ask the question, and decide whether you want to be right or just be with everyone else when they're wrong. If stories like this help you keep your money out of madness, subscribe and turn the bell on. This channel is building a library of financial delusions and the people who fell for them. So when the next can't miss opportunity shows up, you'll recognize the script before it ruins you.